Hayashi Shigo's 1945 panoramic, looking out over the city of Hiroshima, provides a perfect tone and backdrop when trying to understand the aesthetic choices that were made and shared throughout many photographers of the post-World War II era of art in Japan. Each section of the landscape remains in complete desolation and defeat, similar to how the overall atmosphere was at the time. As a result of the damage caused by the war, Japan was completely stripped of its structures, and because of this, its cultural history and specificity as well. This was a time of re-evaluation, rediscovery, and recreation of Japanese culture that allowed for photographers to try and comprehend the traumas and atmosphere through new experiments in direction and form. Focusing on the abstract was a way to render and visually represent the distorted Japanese cultural identity. The photographers of the time dealt with the abstract in two different ways, one through a representation of space and the other through a representation of form and texture. The spatial abstraction of the post-war time completely transforms the familiar Japanese landscape into one that now becomes more foreign through photographic techniques. The photography allows the viewer to see through the broad lens of the collective Japanese citizen in addition to grasping a sense of their psychological state. The viewer becomes lost in the space, whether if it's because of the photographic manipulation or the capturing of a specific occurrence. Abstraction through representations of form and textures is most notable in the work of Shomei Tomatsu. Tomatsu's work is striking because of its ability to challenge the viewer with a subject that is completely unidentifiable, thus allowing them to analyze the contorted properties of the subject while also trying to make sense of what is in front of them. An exact example of this is found in Shomei's famous print featuring a Coke can that was misshapen due to one of the atomic explosions. While its abnormalities could allow for many interpretations as to its exact identity, what is more important is Shomei's focus on texture. In combination with its skin-like tones and deformities, the texture is one that signifies anguish amongst the survivors of the nuclear attacks, but the overall Japanese society. Shomei even goes as far to show us the actual deformities from several of the nuclear survivors whose faces appear frighteningly alien-like. Despite having different subjects in terms of content, Ikao Hosoe and Daido Moriyama also show an interest in the properties of texture and form. In some of their selected photos, not only do the artists seek to reevaluate shape, but also the preconceived gender connotations that belong to each of them. Hosoe's photograph presents a dichotomy of gender that becomes represented through his use of lines. Though Hosoe does present gender roles in a stereotypical fashion, the combination of over-exaggeration and harsh lighting allows the viewer to question what is presented. This combination with gender and the erotic found in the photography is also present in the overall post-war art scene in Japan. Films such as Toshio Matsumoto's experimental documentary, Funeral Parade of Roses, which centers around three male cross-dressers, does not shy away from the erotic, but also the abstractions as well.
大ショーは終わった。さあ、私は君たちを置いていくぞ。次なる旅へシャーロック・ホームズ。
Though the concept of space is a subset and the overall characteristic of abstraction, the different renderings of the landscape also play an important role in the work of the Japanese post-war photographers. Daido Moriyama's interest in the space that is prevalent throughout many of his photographs can be seen as a critique of the modern environment that is growing in Japan, or rather, just a fascination with the cityscape. Regardless of his intentions, Moriyama's frame both isolates the environment and the viewer, forcing them inside an urban space that is otherworldly and uncomfortable. Inside the city, Moriyama's stark contrast between black and white tonalities both discards unnecessary visual information from the frame that create two-tone blocks, while also highlighting some of the textures and detail which give the city a futuristic feel. This critique of the modern landscape can also be seen in Hosoe's work. However, Hosoe's use of contrast highlights the richness of the traditional Japanese landscape in an effort to preserve its beauty. In his body of work, Kamatachi, Hosoi revisits the traditional Japanese landscape at a time of rapid urbanization.
I was not a good documentary photographer of the time, but I wanted to stage something. I wanted to create something by my hand. Those days, that type of photography was not popular. And I was blamed by orthodox photographers. What you're doing is not photography. Photography is just go and take pictures of the subject matter, possibly the social matters. But I thought that was not the only ways to express photography. So I wanted to do my own. The subject matter or the model is Tatsumi Hijikata, who is the founder of Buto. He was born in this area, the countryside, so-called Tohoku, or the east north part of Japan, Akita. I wanted to photograph him at his birthplace. At the same time, I wanted to record the background, okay? Because Japan was changing very rapidly at the time, and I was afraid this landscape will be changed very much. So this is also a record of my memories when I was a little boy, and also the documentary of the time. When I was evacuated to the countryside during the wartime, I was 10, 11 or something like that. My uncle used to tell me the folklore or folk story of the countries. Kamaitachi is one of them. Kamaitachi is an invisible animal. But if you hear the name of Kamaitachi, you have something fear. Oh, it's scared. A snow woman came in the midnight, and she was just floating like that. I said, "It's scared, you know, that kind of thing." So come back home, so that you may not be attacked by Kamaitachi or something like that. And the girls and boys, you know, they come back. That's all things hidden behind. Yeah. Yes. So without those knowledges, without those stories, you can appreciate pictures as they are. That's it. Photography has a power to record things objectively, but it's not the only way as far as you treat with your camera. Behind the camera is a human being who has subjectivity, who has objectivity, mind, you know, everything. So it is a bad thing or a sin to make photography very short and very narrow way. It's good for you to have as many opinions as possible at the same time. You can have a possibility of doing things affected by the time, affected by your personal characteristics, or whatever.